The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The disappearance 5 days ago of a Malaysian Airlines aircraft with 239 people on board is really confounding search teams. It is confusing to aviation analysts, and the mystery is continuing. And of course, this has allowed the slight opening of the window for conspiracy theorists to swoop in with all sorts of different ideas, which we'll talk about. We are talking about a Boeing 777-200. It is considered to be among the world's safest planes. It vanished without any distress call, no other indication that anything was wrong. Now, half a week later, 9 countries, including the US and Australia, have joined a search that has been focusing on the Gulf of Thailand between Malaysia and Vietnam, but is now extending west into Indonesia and east into the South China Sea. And this is just a situation that is both understandably scary to those who fly on planes, the idea that the plane could just disappear, but it's also confusing to the search teams, because how could so many presumably well-coordinated resources be having so much trouble finding any evidence that this plane was there? Authorities were quickly able to trace 2 passengers who boarded the 777 with stolen passports. The area has now grown so large, though, that it's unclear if and when they're going to actually find passengers or parts of the plane. Now, since 1948, about 80 aircraft have been declared missing, according to data compiled by the Aviation Safety Network. This does include jets capable of carrying more than 14 passengers. And these are situations where no trace of the aircraft at all, no bodies, no debris have ever been found. The airplane models have varied, and in the 1940s and the 1950s, you had piston-powered engines, and you had communication systems that were significantly more primitive than now, so a disappearance wasn't that unusual, right? In 1948, there was a Douglas DC-3, which was going to Miami, never reached its destination, vanished without a trace, and this helped feed the Bermuda Triangle theories. But we're in a very different situation now, and these total disappearances of planes never finding a trace are more and more rare. Conspiracy theorists, unsurprisingly, Lewis, are flooding in. This was terrorism. The plane landed somewhere and passengers are being held hostage. If that's the case, you would think soon we would hear from the terrorists with what they want in exchange for releasing the passengers. That's kind of a key part of a non-deliberate crash, terrorism, plane hijacking. Other theories that aliens took the plane or the people are also starting up. But those conspiracy theories aside, this is a very unusual situation.
Yeah, I think this is one of those situations that isn't going to end well. I mean, how could it at this point? I mean, my guess would be that it either broke up in midair and was spread over such a wide distance in such little pieces that I don't know, just maybe impossible to find, or just crashed in some really obscure location.
Those are the most likely scenarios for sure, but it is not stopping speculation. It also should really be making us further explore how aware are we of exactly where planes are and our ability to follow them and our search and rescue operations. And hopefully soon there will be some news. Obviously, with every days ago, the hope for positive news was already mostly gone, if we're to speak realistically. Anthony sent me a very interesting story out of North Carolina. And the story is about North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory. Now, remember, he's the guy who campaigned on not doing any abortion-related stuff if he's elected governor. Then he pushed a bill to prevent the teaching of certain to legislate how abortion is discussed, or maybe it was gay marriage, I forget now, on a social issue. When he was called out on, hey, hold on a second, Governor McCrory, you campaigned on not passing any bills about that. He said, I'm not passing any bills about that issue. I'm passing education bills. That was his explanation. Now, we have a situation in North Carolina where we have to figure out what to do with some coal ash sites around North Carolina. And the Attorney General, Roy Cooper, who's expected to challenge Pat McCrory for governor in 2016, said earlier in the day that he's opposed to allowing Duke Energy to charge utility customers for the removal of its coal ash ponds. And the chief executive of Duke Energy says that, hey, we're going to foot the cleanup bill for the ash spill in the Dan River, but we're going to seek to recover those costs from consumers if we're forced to remove or relocate the coal ash from 14 sites around the state. Anthony summed this up perfectly in his email to me, saying, David, do you see how this works? Capitalism is just fine and dandy for the profits, yet when they're told to clean up their mess, they want to transfer those costs to the people. The company will seek to recover those costs from consumers. What are we saying here? They want to socialize the cleanup costs. This is yet another example of a capitalist governor in this case, who is very, very anti-communist, and a capitalist company who is against any kind of regulation, state involvement, who says, well, we have a right to all of our profits in spite of the fact that we have socialized a lot of the negative side effects of our business. But when something goes wrong, socialism, we're all in this together and we'll front the cost, but then we will recoup them from all of our consumers. It's amazing the double standard that exists in this country with this socializing of losses, but privatization of profits.
Yeah, and if this happens, I don't know, from the root of this story, I mean, coal ash being strewn all over the place in North Carolina and people living downstream from it. I mean, this whole thing is just, I mean, I can't believe this is happening in our country. It's mind-blowing.
At its face, it's a ridiculous, terrible situation that instead of really putting the money into the development of alternative energy, renewable energy, we're still doing all of this fossil fuel stuff. It's bad for the environment. That's layer one. Layer two is that we have a system in place that not only has government subsidies for a lot of this non-renewable energy, we privatize the profits. Those stay with the company. But then the losses, the mistakes, are then recouped and socialized from consumers. It's absolutely sickening. It is the epitome of what we point out as problematic with our system, fully on display. A soldier who is on sex assault prevention duty has now been charged with sexual abuse. This is a story that Heather sent us. It's about an Army sergeant at Fort Hood who was tasked with preventing sexual assault. He now faces a court-martial for sexual abuse, adultery, and other criminal charges. There were 21 initial charges filed by the Army against Sergeant First Class Gregory McQueen. They're related to pandering, conspiracy, maltreatment of a subordinate, abusive sexual contact, adultery, and detrimental contact, according to the Texas base. The allegation surfaced that he had turned some cash-strapped female soldiers into prostitutes who he then offered to high-ranking members. And on Thursday, the Senate actually voted down a measure. Listen to this. The Senate voted down a measure that would have given military prosecutors the power to decide whether to bring charges instead of leaving that decision to military commanders. That would have been good. I've talked for years, Lewis, about the problem with the chain of command when it comes to sexual abuse reporting in the military. You go through this chain of command, and very often those in the chain of command are either part of the problem that is being that is the subject of the complaint, or they are friendly with or otherwise have reason to protect those who are the accused perpetrators. Therefore, it would be really good to completely remove the reporting process from the chain of command. The military resists that, okay? This would have been an in-between step, which is all right. We'll keep it within the military, but prosecutors can at least decide to bring charges rather than leaving that to military commanders. No, that got voted down as well. The entire system is completely corrupt. We know that only 1 in 10, roughly, military instances of military sexual assault are even reported. And of those, we see many of them caught up in this horribly corrupt system. I feel so horrible for everybody who is subject to this system because they deserve better. They are out there, whether we agree with or not the mission they are being sent to do. They are out there doing what they believe is serving their country, and they can't even trust that they'll be kept safe.
Yeah, it is pretty sad. I mean, things are so bad that if any, and I know men are assaulted too in the military,
Of course.
but it's more common with women. And if any young woman asked my opinion about going to the military, I would say that's a terrible idea strictly because of this. Even John McCain said, I believe it was McCain, said he wouldn't even send his own daughter into the military.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and it's disgusting. And listen, we really don't treat our soldiers that well. We hear a lot from the right about support the troops, and a lot of times what that means is send them in to kill people we don't like and put a ribbon on your car. But when it comes to funding their health care, when it comes to not sending them into harm's way based on false premises or a trumped-up pretext, to quote Secretary of State John Kerry, when it comes to making sure that they are protected and that those who commit sexual assault are actually held responsible and punished for that, we really don't treat our soldiers that well, and it is sad. But I know I'm just a liberal. I don't care about the troops. It's the right wing that supports the troops. Fox News' Stuart Varney is outraged that states are figuring out a way to feed poor people and homeless people in spite of food stamp cuts. He is outraged that state governments have figured out a way to keep helping the poor feed themselves after an $800 million cut on January 29th from SNAP, which is the food stamp program. Officials in Connecticut, New York, and Pennsylvania are being proactive. This is a good thing. They figured out a way to make changes to state programs to tie food stamp eligibility to home heating assistance, under the logic that if you can't even pay for home heating, it stands to reason that you probably need some food stamps as well. Perfectly logical. This is a good thing, and Stuart Varney is not happy about it. Here's what he had to say.
This completely negates, almost entirely negates, the cuts that Congress imposed. It shows you, once you've got a program, you can never get rid of it, and it's very difficult to cut. And what's really going on here is the government is buying votes. They're churning out the food stamps in return for votes. That's what's happening.
And this is a tough situation.
Those wily poor people, they're figuring out a way to eat despite our best efforts to keep food stamps away from them. It's amazing, the outrage. You don't hear much outrage among Stuart Varney types and Fox News about, for example, the way we actually are treating our members of the military, which I just spoke about. You don't hear outrage about bills that would completely negate the separation of church and state, seeking to inject Christian doctrine into social legislation. But they're really angry after you cut states' access to food stamp benefits, and they keep figuring out a way to feed poor people. They're terrible, terrible people, Lewis.
Terrible people. And the idea that this is buying votes, I mean, that just assumes that Obama is trying to buy votes, right?
Yeah, of course, it's President Obama, because no Republicans who had food stamp programs were trying to buy votes with them.
Right. Under Bush, there were just no food stamps, and there was nothing going on there.
No mention on the segment of corporate welfare, which is orders of magnitude more expensive than food stamps. No mentions by Stuart Varney of the fact that food stamp government spending is exponentially more stimulative to the economy than corporate welfare, than tax cuts for the rich. But Stuart Varney is outraged that states have the audacity to find ways to keep feeding people who can't afford to feed themselves. It's a sad situation over on Fox News. Let's take a break. Excellent show planned for you today. Patriot Mail is today as well. That's next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
You can support our program with the shopping you already plan to do on Amazon.com by going to our website, davidpakman.com. Click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page and use the bookmark anytime you shop. That will send 7% of your purchase to us and take it away from Amazon. Doesn't cost you any extra. You can also become a David Pakman Show member, made possible in part by liberalbias.com. The more you look for it, the more you find it. You can find Liberal Bias in the most unexpected places at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is John Cogswell. John, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. You can join John and get a free t-shirt with that membership for the next few days if you go to davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT. If you've been thinking of supporting the show, this is a great time to do it, and you'll be entered in our giveaway happening on March 31st. We'll be giving away a bunch of very cool stuff, up to and including the David Pakman Show microphones that have been on set with us for years. Very exciting stuff. Let's go to Hatriot Mail. Some people aren't familiar with Hatriot Mail. Let me tell you a little bit about what Hatriot Mail is.
The right of the people to keep and bear hate shall not be infringed. Patriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
A lot of people like that. We call that the Second Amendment explainer for Hatriot Mail. People really seem to like that one. Here is today's Hatriot Mail. I don't want to make people wait any longer. And why would I do that? People like Hatriot Mail. People want to hear Hatriot Mail. And there is no reason at all to delay Hatriot Mail any amount of time at all. Any number of seconds is too many to wait before Hatriot Mail, which I will now play for you.
I will never listen again. You might want to consider that when you're interviewing someone. You try to control the outcome of every remark, and you seem more interested in what you have to say. The antagonism is pathetic. Your audience must just like sensationalism, not fair and balanced news.
That's a weird one because I feel like our audience likes that the show doesn't sensationalize, at least not nearly as much as corporate media. I think that I might be going on a limb here. The person who wrote this Hatriot Mail may not be as familiar with this show as they might want us to think.
Yeah, but we do know that they are very familiar with Fox News and the fair and balanced point of view on Fox News.
They know all about that. There's Hatriot Mail for today with our Second Amendment introduction. Love that. So President Obama made huge headlines for going on Zach Galifianakis' online show Between Two Ferns and talking about health insurance and Obamacare and state exchanges. Huge, huge, huge press for this. However, not everybody was happy about it. ABC's Jim Avila peppered White House Press Secretary Jay Carney with questions during a press briefing about President Obama showing up on Between Two Ferns. And he said, how much discussion was there in the White House about the dignity of the office and whether or not, in order to reach these people who don't watch us at 6:30 or who don't watch this briefing, how much the dignity of the office might be lost? This is an interview like no other probably ever done by a president. Jay Carney said, we're constantly looking at different ways to reach Americans who don't necessarily get information about healthcare.gov from evening news broadcasts or from newspapers. And then Avila goes on and he says, I understand the purpose, but was the presidency damaged in any way? And Jay Carney said, no, not at all. On Fox News, the Fox and Friends bunch said that it's inappropriate for President Obama to do mock comedy interviews, and it's also inappropriate to advertise a law. Check out this clip from Fox and Friends.
Should the President of the United States be doing this online with Will Ferrell's online site with Zach Galifianakis? Playing the straight man?
Wow, that was incredible.
Yeah,
I laughed hard. I mean, that was, it was pretty good.
It is so inappropriate.
It was inappropriate for who?
For the President of the United States to be sitting down with an interview that's a mock-up.
Some would argue
that slam dunk.
Some would argue it's inappropriate for the President of the United States to be advertising a law, an insurance plan.
Well,
it's wrong, Lewis, for the president to advertise a law. We could spend an hour trying to figure out what that line even means, but I have a few questions here. With regard to Jim Avila from ABC News, how can a reporter from a major television network ask such a stupid, inept question without being fired? Did an interview, which led to, by the way, record traffic on healthcare.gov, did it damage the presidency because President Obama was, I guess he was playing a character. He was playing along or something like that. And then he talks about the dignity of the office. I wonder if the dignity of the office isn't being taken seriously by those who say President Obama is a Kenyan Muslim, for example, or when racist Tea Partiers say almost anything, or those who say President Obama is fighting for the other side, whoever the other side happens to be that day. Where's their respect for the dignity of the presidency? These comments are ridiculous. The questions are so imbecilic, and the Fox and Friends stuff, we've come to expect that. Don't conservatives remember that Ronald Reagan performed in movies with chimpanzees, right? I mean, don't they remember that George W. Bush did serious interviews but appeared to be completely incompetent and basically unable to speak English in many cases? That, to me, sounds way more concerning than President Obama in a measured satire piece that was very effective at promoting healthcare.gov.
Yeah, and actually somewhat informative. If you want to talk about dignity, ABC, where's their dignity? I mean, aren't they supposed to be reporting on things that matter? And
right. That's actually,
nightly news.
This is a good point. It's offensive that Jim Avila's question at the press briefing was whether something on funnyordie.com with Zach Galifianakis may have damaged the presidency. What about asking a question about income inequality or feeding poor people or something of relevance? That's really what I think isn't dignified, wasting your question on that.
Yeah, absolutely. ABC is completely without dignity. It's a total joke.
Pat Robertson on the 700 Club got another question, which is hard to believe that it's actually a real question. This one was about whether there was a coincidence that after watching a horror movie, someone had something bad. They got into a car accident. No surprise, Pat Robertson says, yes, that may actually happen. Let's listen, let's watch, let's prepare. I encourage you to take sedatives if you have them before listening to this.
This is Michelle, who says, I was watching a horror movie the other day on the recommendation of others. It was rather strange and awfully macabre. And then this past Sunday, I got into an accident leaving church. Did watching that creepy movie cause a curse or the Lord's protection to be lifted from me? Did I grieve the Holy Spirit by watching this series?
A few years ago, I heard about a teenage girl who was demon possessed. And people began to deal with the demon and try to cast it out. And you know what the demon said? I had permission. And the permission was granted when this child had gone to some double X-rated movie or whatever it was and had allowed this thing to come into her. I know this sounds kind of otherworldly, but that's the way it is.
So we're adding to the list, right? Horror movies can cause people to become demonically possessed, which adds to feng shui, yoga, karate, horoscopes, Twilight movies, paintings of Buddha, television shows about ghosts, Halloween, psychics, young girls levitating their friends at sleepovers, and sometimes, this is not all the time, but sometimes adopted children from other countries can come already demonically possessed.
Let's not forget about clothing, David.
Oh, yeah. Sweaters from Goodwill might also come pre-demonized, which can really be problematic because once the demons set in, if you don't get them out right away, you typically with club soda and baking powder, if you don't get those demons out right away, they'll set in and it doesn't matter how many times you wash them, they're not coming out.
Yeah, I mean, some washers have that special setting. You can turn it to like demon to get rid of the demons, but most of them don't.
See, I just upgraded my washer dryer to one that has a setting for wools and delicates, but it's not expensive enough to have the one for demonic possession. What isn't demonically possessed these days? I think I know the one thing that has no chance of leading to demonic possession. It's sending Pat Robertson money.
Yeah. David, that is probably the number one way to avoid demonic possession.
Next, we will talk to ex-economic hitman John Perkins. Check out the work we're doing on Patreon, patreon.com/David Pakman. That's patreon.com/David Pakman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by John Perkins. He's the author of Hoodwinked and also Confessions of an Economic Hitman. He describes himself as an ex-economic hitman and also claims to have played a role in the process of economic colonization of third world countries. John, it's really a pleasure to speak with you. I find your background so interesting. Why don't we, just to give the audience who may not yet be familiar with you a little bit of sense of your background, give us your background as an economic hitman and what that means.
All right, David, thank you. Yeah, my official title was chief economist at a major consulting firm out of Boston. I had several dozen employees working for me. Our job was really to identify countries that have resources our corporations covet, like oil, then arrange huge loans to that country from the World Bank or its sister organizations. But the money never actually went to the country. Instead, it went to our own corporations to build infrastructure projects in that country. They made a great deal of profit from that. Also, some of the wealthier people benefited from these projects, things like electric systems, industrial parks, highways, things that benefit very wealthy families but don't help the majority of the people who are too poor to buy electricity and can't get jobs in industrial parks because they don't hire many people. Yet the country would be left holding a huge debt they couldn't repay. And so at some point we'd go back and say, hey, you know, since you can't pay your debts, sell your resource, oil, whatever, very cheap to our companies without any environmental restrictions or social regulations, or privatize your public sector businesses. Sell them real cheap, your utility companies, your water and sewage system, your schools, your jails, off to our corporations. And in that way, we really created the world's first truly global empire, primarily without the use of the military.
So you're really talking about so many, you were directly exposed, in other words, to so many of the issues we talk about on this program and that corporate media often ignores, which are corporate control over the commons, the privatization of public goods and resources, and so many of these other things. But at a certain point, did you have some kind of a realization that what you were helping to achieve was a negative thing, or how did you transition out of that world?
Well, it's a very interesting system, David, because in fact, in business school, I was taught that that's exactly what you should do. If you want to help a developing country grow its economy, you invest billions of dollars in infrastructure. And statistically, we can show that that works. The economy increases. But as I got deeper and deeper into this, and perhaps because I had been a Peace Corps volunteer before this, living with very poor people in Ecuador, I came to understand that the poor people were not benefiting, that the statistics reflect the very wealthy, which is true in this country too. We know that 85 people control more resources than half the world's population. Our statistics are very, very skewed to those rich people. So I very quickly began to, or I shouldn't say very quickly, it took me a bit of time, but I discovered that, you know, our mission of helping the poorest of the poor was not working. We were doing exactly the opposite. We were helping the wealthiest of the wealthy.
So what did you do? You quit your job, certainly, but what activist role did you take?
Well, I first started to write a book, which eventually would become Confessions, and I contacted other economic hitmen and jackals. Jackals are the people that go in if the economic hitmen fail and assassinate or overthrow presidents. I'd seen this happen with two of my clients, a democratically elected president of Ecuador, Jaime Roldos, and the president of Panama, Omar Torrijos. They did not buy the system. They didn't listen to me, and they were both assassinated. So I quit my job. I started writing and contacting these people, and I immediately got serious threats on my life and my young daughter's life. At the same time, I was offered a job. I was taken out to dinner by the chairman of the board of Stone & Webster, another major big consulting firm. He said, hey, you got a great resume. I did. I'd been chief economist of his rival. He said, we'd like to use your resume in our proposals. You won't have to do any work for us, and we'd like to pay you a $500,000 consultant's retainer. Just don't write the book.
So here. Yeah, no, that's it. So then now we're kind of transitioning into the other thing I want to talk about. And I want to be very clear. I highly recommend everybody read your book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. They can also read Hoodwink, but really we're talking about a lot of the stuff from Confessions. Not everything you've said has avoided scrutiny and controversy. And I would love to get your reactions to some of the claims that are made by State Department releases, which say that parts of your book, not insignificant parts, are, quote, total fabrications, that your allegations about, for example, the NSA's involvement in economic policy is just completely made up. You know that you've been scrutinized significantly. Now, the easy way to counter this would be for you to say, well, of course they're going to say that because they don't want the truth getting out. And to me, I hope we can move past that kind of obvious rebuttal and really get your thoughts about what the reaction has been from the State Department to much of what you've written.
Let me first start by saying that the New York Times did a major front page of the financial section of Sunday Times on the book, and they vetted it very, very strongly and came to the conclusion that it was truthful. The State Department, I found out why they created a blog, or rather at that time a website called the Misinformation Website, and my book was the only thing on it. And it was puzzling to me because it sold a lot of copies of the book for me. And they did. They made the allegation that I claimed that I'd been recruited by the National Security Agency, which I was, and that was ridiculous because the National Security Agency only does cryptography, encoding and decoding messages. Well, even back then in 2005 or so, we all knew that NSA did more than that.
And now especially, we certainly know that they do more than that. What were the circumstances of this recruitment attempt?
Well, first of all, I was married to a woman whose father was very high up in the Department of the Navy in Washington. One of his best friends was high up in the National Security Agency. I was looking for a job that would keep me out of Vietnam. And so he arranged for me to be interviewed by the NSA. That would do it. And they put me through extensive testing, days of psychological testing, including lie detector tests, and concluded that I would make a good economic hitman.
I'm interested in this. What other kinds of psychological tests did they put you through?
Well, there were written tests, there were interviews, there were lie detector tests. That's about it. Yeah. I mean, I was in a room by myself with lots of desks, writing this thing with books around me. I'm sure there are cameras watching me. The whole routine.
Okay, so that's one side of it. The other thing, and I'll just ask you directly, the State Department claims that you believe the government was complicit in the assassinations of JFK, Robert F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, John Lennon, and unnamed U.S. senators who have died in plane crashes. Is that something you allege?
No,
it's not.
I've never alleged that. I probably opened the question as to whether that might have been that way. What I have alleged, though, is that we were involved in the assassination of Jaime Roldos of Ecuador and Omar Torrijos of Panama, because I was there. I know. We've admitted that we took out Allende in Chile. Henry Kissinger's admitted it, and Arbenz in Guatemala, and Lumumba and Diem and Mossadegh in Iran. We've admitted to many of these things. And I also wanted to go back, David, for just a moment to the State Department thing. I always wondered why they did that website, because it sold a lot of books for me. And I found out later through a good friend who was also a host of a major show in Athens, who did a show on me and was called into the Athens, Greece U.S. Embassy, called on the carpet for doing that show. And the ambassador said, it puts me in a very embarrassing position because people come in and ask me, is Perkins' book real? What is your official position on it? He said, I don't have one. I don't know what to say. Well, I believe that a lot of diplomats around the world were asked that question. So the State Department felt that it had to come out with an official statement that negated the book, and that's why they did what they did. And it got their diplomats off the hook. They could just say, hey, the official position is on our website. Don't ask me any more about it. And it sold a lot of books for me.
Very quickly, just in the last minute we have left here, I would love to just get your opinion on when you look at the United States right now and the influence that big corporations and big banks have over everybody's everyday lives in terms of the political system, the economic system, resources, etc. What's your biggest concern? In other words, in which area do you think we're closest to the tipping point for things really taking a turn for the worst?
Well, I think what we know is we've created a death economy, one that's based on killing people, militarization, and ravaging the earth. We need to move into a life economy that's based on cleaning up pollution, feeding starving people, developing new technologies for transportation, communications, energy, etc. And we've been moving more and more in a very bad direction. We've created an economy, a global economy, that's an abject failure. Less than 5% of us live in the United States. We consume almost 30% of the world's resources while half the world's starving. That's not a model. Can't be repeated by China, even though they're trying. It just puts the world in a worse condition when other countries try to repeat our model. We must come up with a new model. And I think that the heads of corporations that are really smart are understanding this. I recently was invited to be the lead-off keynote speaker at a conference of 2,000 business executives in Istanbul. I get those invitations fairly frequently. I think business is beginning to get it. I think consumers are beginning to get it. I think we're truly in a consciousness revolution, a huge revolution where people are waking up to the fact that we're living on a very fragile space station that has no shuttles. We're going to have to take care of this place, and big business is going to have to play a major role in waking up and taking care of this, serving a public interest, not the 1%, but the 99%, serving the earth in essence, and we all need to get out there and make sure that happens.
We've been speaking with John Perkins. The books are Hoodwinked and Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Really great to have you on. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, David. And I'd like to encourage people to go to johnperkins.org and sign up for my newsletter and see where I'm going to be speaking so I can meet them personally.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Public support for same-sex marriage continues to grow. We've covered that extensively. And as it does, the gap between young and old is becoming more and more striking, specifically, listen to this, within the Republican Party. There's a new Pew Research Center poll which shows that 61% of Republicans and Republican leaners under 30 years old favor same-sex marriage, while only 35% oppose it. In contrast to this, just 27% of Republicans aged 50 and older favor allowing gays and lesbians to legally marry. 61 to 27. This is a 34-point differential within Republicans between young and old. We would expect to see a 34-point differential between Democrats and Republicans, between liberals and conservatives, between, I don't know, we could find other groups. But a 61 to 27% or 61% to 27% difference split within different Republican age groups is very significant. And the meaning of this is completely obvious. We have new generations for whom, regardless of being fiscally conservative, for example, gay marriage is just not really a big deal. Everybody knows gay couples, lesbian parents, gay parents, and it's just not a big deal. You just go about your lives. And when I think about my half-sister, who's almost 10 years old, she has no idea that there's even a controversy around gay rights. She has some friends who have two moms. She has some friends who have two dads. And her entire generation would never, unless they are brainwashed by either religion or bigoted parents, they're never going to default to the idea that gay parents, gay couples are a weird or unusual thing. And this is just more proof. 61% of under 30 Republicans are in favor of legal same-sex marriage. We know the direction this is going, and the desperation is there. That's where all of these so-called religious freedom bills are coming from.
Yeah, 61% is a high number. But we should also mention that among the 61%, there are a large portion of that, even though they identify as Republican, when asked about individual issues, it would become clear that they are actually would normally vote Democrat.
Yeah, their interests would be better served based on their individual policy views, but for voting for Democrats or more liberal people. But regardless, they're still voting for Republicans right now, so we'll consider them Republicans. But you're completely right about that, Lewis. John McCain, speaking of polls, is calling a poll that says he has an only 30% approval rate a bogus poll. There was a poll released last week by Public Policy Polling, which is a Democratic-leaning group, and it found that John McCain has a 30% approval rating in his home state, which is the lowest of any senator in the country. A lot of people aren't aware that John McCain has become this unpopular in Arizona. John McCain said that the poll is bogus. He went on Fox Business's Cavuto and he said, "There's a bogus poll out there. I can sense the people of my state. When I travel around, which I do all the time, they like me and I'm very grateful." He didn't mention the poll by name, but it's assumed he meant the PPP poll. Of course, Lewis, there is unfortunately this other poll from last April, which says, this is from Behavior Research Center's Rocky Mountain poll, and it had John McCain's approval in Arizona at only 26%, which was his lowest in 21 years. And 67% of Arizonans at that time said they want a new senator. It's time for somebody else. Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea for John McCain to run again. He said he's thinking about it. He's not sure if he will or won't. I think it's pretty clear John McCain may have lost his popularity in Arizona.
I think so. It's, I admire his tenacity and the fact that he wants to continue to serve his country. But you know what? Just retire, just relax, just enjoy life.
He can still do so many things. He might even be able to do more, not as a senator, because he wouldn't be restricted by party politics so much and having to make sure that he's on the right side, that his committees are on the same issues, etc. He might be able to do more if he retired and did something else. But certainly it looks like he is having serious trouble in Arizona. Every politician should just do that. If you don't like the polls, the poll's bogus. Well, what evidence do you have? Oh, well, I just know more people like me than that. It's a bogus poll. Trust me, it's bogus. Let's go to your voicemails. 219-2-DAVID-P is our voicemail number. Here is a voicemail about last week's Hatriot Mail, which we called Wine Queer Edition. Instantly one of the most popular Hatriot Mails in history.
Oh, Dave, I've been laughing for 2 days about that Wine Queer Hatriot Mail. That is funny. It's not only funny because it's so stupid and the spelling's wrong, and whatever a wine queer is, I wonder if a person drinks beer in their day, if they're a beer queer. But it's funny because it's like a little kid with ice cream telling another kid, ha, you don't get any. It's just funny. I actually recorded it, and I've watched it, I swear, 12 times now. It's just so funny. I have to keep watching it over and over.
Hey, I don't blame you. Hatriot Mail is addictive, but you don't have to record it per se. The clip's on YouTube, and you can just press the replay button. Just a little technical suggestion I like to offer anytime I have the opportunity. Let's listen to one more voicemail here.
Good evening, David and Lewis. This is Gordon in Oregon. I saw the full show and the bonus show today, Monday. I made time to watch it late at night. I want to comment on one of the first stories you were talking about on the full show about this Hispanic women. There is too many of them, especially the young Mexicans. They're always pregnant, always with children, with baby carts. And, they're like... they're having too many children, and you never see men with them, their husbands. And they're speaking in Spanish, which leads me to believe they're illegal aliens because they're over here.
Yeah, okay. This is the craziest voicemail we've ever received from Gordon. I thought Gordon was kind of a liberal guy. He talks about how he loves our show, and he identifies as gay and all this stuff. And then he comes out with this insane xenophobic rant about how people who speaks, he assumes women speaking Spanish in the U.S. must be here illegally, and there's too many Hispanic children. I'm shocked, Lewis, by Gordon. Gordon is really, every time we get a voicemail from him, we are able to further build our assessment of who Gordon is as a person, and some aspects of his political views are very troubling to me.
But it's always fascinating.
Oh, believe me, it's always fascinating. I'm not denying that. What are we talking about on today's bonus show? We will talk about space debris. We will talk about Pakistan, polio, and militants. We will talk about how gay Craigslist casual encounter ads exploded when CPAC was in town, and much, much more. How do you access the bonus show, hosted and produced by producer Lewis in the Austin, Texas bureau of the David Pakman Show? Very easy. You become a David Pakman Show member. Go to davidpakman.com/membership. Or if you do it in the next few days, you go to davidpakman.com/Reddit, REDDIT, and you will get a t-shirt from us simply for signing up for a 1-year membership. That does it for today. Thank you to Lewis for being here today. We didn't know if he was going to be here today. He tries to bail out sometimes before the show starts, and I say, no, Lewis, we've agreed you'd be on today's show, and we are grateful for that. We will talk to you on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.